I cannot do things without being under the influence. And you can try this, you can do that. I've tried it all.
I have always struggled with substances just to get things done.
It's f***ed my life. I'm either going to be like successful alcoholic and drug addict, or I'm going to be not successful at all.
On my gravestone, this is what it said. Whenever I'm sober, I wish that I was dead. The choice for some of us is not between drugs and sobriety. The choice is between drugs and suicide. So hello, you wonderful citizen of cyberspace, and welcome to a bit of a waffle inspired by several videos that have been floating around TikTok this past week regarding autism, ADHD and addiction, or more specifically, people with these conditions who need to imbibe substances in order to function at all, if not to just stay alive. I saw those videos and I related so hard. My first attempt at recording this thing turned into such a long and completely incoherent rant. I couldn't even use it. There was no saving it. It was uneditable. And the only solution I could find to rein myself in was to write it all out and give you a video essay instead, interspersed with the scattered brilliance of several TikTokers who are referenced in the box below. So this TikTok discourse, it was all kicked off by peachprc, whose incredibly relatable outpouring of frustration contained these two main points.
I cannot do things without being under the influence. You can work on these things, you can get better, and you can try this, you can do that. I've tried it all.
Now, obviously, it's really sad to see a creator you like so much being torn apart by issues that you're completely horribly familiar with yourself. But the videos in response to Peach gave me such a sense of validation and reassurance in knowing that it's not only me dealing with this shit. Because I've been fucking gaslit for 14 years now by my increasingly shitty drug treatment clinic into thinking that anyone can get completely clean. That addiction is always a fixable problem because the drugs are the problem, right? They're the only problem. Like, what are you even saying? That drugs are a problem that comes from nowhere? That a drug with a reputation like heroin would ever be picked up by someone mentally healthy? Like, you're just going through life and you've got no problems at all, no mental health issues, and you go, oh, heroin, that's likely to kill you or ruin your life and make you homeless. I'll pick up that. No, it clearly comes from somewhere else. There is clearly something wrong with you before you pick up that drug. Therefore, just flicking the drug out the window is not going to magically fix you without having some kind of other psychological treatment. And you know what my drug treatment centre does for psychological treatment? Nothing. What they will say to you is, we do not provide psychological therapies under this roof. That is drug treatment in the UK under the Tory party. I've been going to this drug treatment centre since the Labour government. They used to provide a variety of psychological treatments, as you would imagine for a place that treats mental illness, right? Under the Tories, they provide no psychological help and yet somehow expect you to get better. Yeah, we'll get on to naming and shaming later. Just like an eating disorder, serious drug addiction always comes from pre-existing mental illness and or trauma. For some of us, our brain, our neurochemistry is the problem and drugs become the solution. It's a very flawed solution with a lot of negative side effects. But we wouldn't keep doing it if it didn't also fix some of our life problems. When you remove the faulty solution that is drug abuse for an autistic, things are often not fine and dandy. Sometimes they're even worse because drug treatment places, as I say, are not trained or equipped to deal at the moment with any kind of mental disorder, but particularly with neurodivergence. So when you find yourself in a far worse state sober than you did in active addiction, on and on they keep spouting that you're just not trying hard enough, that you just don't want it enough, that full sobriety is always the best way for everyone, because we all, human beings, you can always just stuff us into one little box, can't you? When it comes to mental illness and the complexities of treating it, there's always just one answer for everyone. One antidepressant works for everyone across the board. Of course it fucking doesn't. One type of therapy works for everyone across the board. No, it fucking doesn't. So is there any surprise that full sobriety is not necessarily the fix for everyone? The fact that, Cali sober or sober with weed is becoming such a popular thing because we're realising that not everyone can rock full sobriety. Like, surprise, surprise, we're not all the same. I know from my own fucking decades of life experience that I would have taken my own life several times over or died from my eating disorder long, long ago if drugs hadn't come along and papered over the cracks. Now, I don't expect to have a long life to hold off inevitability forever, nor would I even want a long life. But the fact that drugs, in my particular case, not yours, not anyone else's, I'm not generalizing here, but for me personally, as an autistic ADHDer, the fact that drugs have helped me more than they've hurt me is a hill I would personally die on. The myth that full sobriety, total cleanness is the 100% successful solution for everyone is clearly not true. You can see this in the fact that many of the drugs we find ourselves most addicted to are also used as legitimate medications for pain. Ever think that physical pain isn't the only type of pain that needs and benefits from medication? Why does no one consider mental pain, mental anguish, when they talk about painkillers? And when it comes to medications generally, anyone who is on one will tell you that they are not better off without their fucking meds. Human disease, both physical and mental, is a common thing, and many of us function better with some form of medication, some form of drug inside our bodies. And many drugs that were, just a couple of decades ago, considered naughty, dirty abuse drugs like ketamine, MDMA, psilocybin, are now being found, what a shock, to actually have really great potential in the mental health treatment field. This being such, addicts and drug users need to be fucking listened to when they say that a drug is helping them function. And they really need to be listened to when they say that the only thing keeping them alive is a particular drug. But the link between autism, ADHD, and self-medication in the form of addiction has not been studied well enough, which leaves those of us struggling with these conditions flailing in the dark when it comes to accessing appropriate treatment. With this said, I'd like to show you the next video clip I've hoarded away on my phone from Alliepriestley. The minute I saw this, I saved it and I sent it to my fucking drug worker because Ali says everything I've been trying to say to these useless bloody bastards for years now. And I thought it might actually make them listen if they heard it from somebody else's mouth. I mean, obviously that was a dumb pipe dream because they, it says red. I know they saw it. They didn't even respond. But nonetheless, Ali's video is fantastic, so here it comes.
Nobody talks about the kind of brains that have to use substances to function. This is Sarah Hendricks talking about a client that's autistic that she allows to sip on wine all day long because if he doesn't, he will leave this planet. Because that's how intense our brains are. I have always struggled with substances just to get things done. Like the most basic things. It's not a moral failing. If you're addicted to food, same thing. My brain is always seeking, never satisfied.
Exactly. Fucking exactly. Our brains are ludicrously intense, uncomfortable places to be, and neurotypicals flat out do not, seemingly cannot understand that it isn't just laziness or stubbornness or selfishness. I strongly suggest that you don't get up on a high horse about someone else's life experience when you've never visited their brain or anything like it. One more thing, though, that Ali mentioned in her video regards brain injuries, head trauma, and the fact that this too can have a big impact on mental health. It can cause anxiety and depression, and I've also heard that impulse control and emotional dysregulation are big side effects of head injuries and head trauma. But it wasn't until Ali pointed this out that I began to think about my own history of head injuries, and I thought, oh, fuck, why has no one ever clocked this before? Because when I was about 3 years old, I split my head open, requiring a hospital trip for stitches, which were done without anaesthetic in my head, because I guess they just thought, fuck it, the kid's already screaming, it won't remember this as an adult, so why bother? The 80s were a fun time. But because I was so young, whether this incident affected my personality or mental health, I will never know. I also had multiple head injuries from horse riding in my teens. And in 2017, as an alcoholic, I did something to my brain. Quite a bad something. Either I fell from my 6-foot-up ceiling bed onto my head, or I had quite a large seizure. The hospital never bothered scanning anything because they thought I was just drunk, which, like, I was. But even for me, like, this incident was so weird and so out of character and just odd. And for 2 to 3 months after this unknown event, I was barely able to string a sentence together. My IQ was in the toilet. Everything was seen through this grey haze of confusion. It was something I'd never experienced before or since in my life. I kept telling people that everything was weird, but they just, again, wrote it off as me being drunk. And I literally could not find the words to advocate for myself. So it went wholly undiagnosed and untreated. No one ever scanned my head. I don't know what happened. But whether concussion or the effects of a seizure, who knows what the long-term effects of spending literally like 2 to 3 months in this barely coherent state of either like post-seizure or concussion, I don't know. I know I emerged from my alcoholism very different to the person I'd been when I went in, but was that just a side effect of maturing and learning, or was it a major brain injury? I don't know. And before I get into the discussion of Ali's other points, I need to show you a couple more video clips. The first is from Sam Morris, who I related to so hard it was like looking in the fucking mirror. So here he comes.
I rely so much on alcohol and always have done to be able to operate normally in social environments, like to be able to operate as a normal person. And the problem is with this is that it's fucked my life. My career is nothing like it would be if I didn't have this issue. I'm either going to be like successful fucking alcoholic and drug addict, or I'm going to be not successful at all. I have to have something to cope with this world that I have been put in that I don't know how to deal with. As an autistic person, I can't deal with it. And when people try to say to me, like, you know, you could work on it, you can do this, I completely agree with this creator. Like, it is the most frustrating thing ever, because it's ruined my career in many ways. The reason that I am so successful on the internet and I've never been successful anywhere else is because of that. I'm stuck in a world where I am going to be only ever working in a cyber capacity, where I'm able to publish books. Like I wrote and published my own book, so I can send off my book to people. I can communicate with people via writing. And I don't think that people really understand. I think even my friends don't even understand what I feel like sometimes.
So yeah, all of that was basically me too. The ability to be reasonably successful within an internet/work from home as own boss situation, but totally unable to function in any other type of work or in any other sphere of life, that would be me. I may be stripped back more or less to prescription drugs now, but the essence remains the same. And in fact, I'd argue that I'm worse off in terms of functionality and happiness on cruddy prescription drugs than I was on heroin or speed. But my body's just too knackered now to take either of those things. Functionally, even when it comes to doing this as a job, if I ever got a book published by an agency who wanted me to do book tours and signings and all of that stuff that realistically makes an author their bread and butter, I highly doubt I could stand to do it at all, and certainly not stone cold sober. That would be beyond terrifying, totally uncomfortable, totally unmanageable. And YouTube itself, there are so many elements of this that I'm just shit at. Like there is a ceiling for me. I feel like as far as YouTube and like success and all of that, like there is a ceiling for me, because I'm just so not good at so many elements of it. All the admin, all the planning, keeping stuff up to date, replying to hundreds of comments and messages without being completely overwhelmed by just one or two of them, which means I miss like endless opportunities, because it's like I just don't see them until it's happened, because there's so many inboxes, there's so many people, and even if people are lovely, like one or two messages is so overwhelming and so like spotlighty. It's, you know, there's this awkward grey area where it's like you're not making enough to employ like a personal assistant or something to do this stuff for you, but you kind of need to do that if you're going to advance to any degree. But how do you afford that? So I don't know. To be fair, like I don't think I would cope with or particularly want like a vast level of success or being in the public eye like that wouldn't suit me. I don't think I just wouldn't cope with it. So there's that. But at the same time, you know that you feel you should be advancing. I think whatever career you're in, you feel like you should be advancing in some kind of way. And like, I think for those of us dealing with these kinds of issues, whatever job and field you're in, there is like a line that you're not going to go above because of this shit just standing in your way. And finally, the other element being the ghastly and inevitable bouts of online drama with this job, which generally drive me to near suicide. Once again, I would not be sitting here today if it weren't for substances and having some form of medication or drug instead of going directly to offing myself. I don't know how many of you remember my song Break Me, but it still holds true. My strength comes in a little bottle. My strength comes in a little pill. Anyone can be a hero with the correct ammunition. You can't break me now. But I think the truest lyric I ever wrote comes from Golden Brown. On my gravestone, this is what it said. Whenever I'm sober, I wish that I was dead. And that is wholly true, eternally. Because what drug workers and psychiatrists don't understand at all when it comes to neurodivergent people and addiction, the choice for some of us is not between drugs and sobriety. The choice is between drugs and suicide. When repeatedly the only thing you can do in order to not end your own life right here and now is to go buy drugs, even if you know you're too old and battered to really take them and those drugs will make you sick, or even if those drugs are landing you in legal or financial hot water, if it is the only way to keep yourself alive, what are you supposed to do? I mean, when it comes to like legal stuff and things like that, how many people do you know or have you seen online knowing that they're taking huge gambles when they're fucking around with piss tests, or they're doing things like injecting methadone because it's the only drug they can get away with on probation, but they're that desperate for something, they're going to just top themselves if they can't do something. So they're injecting syrup into their veins, or they're doing awful things with fake piss to try and get through. You've got like, this is not a sane decision, which means mental illness, which means it needs to be dealt with in a kinder, more forward-thinking, more modern, intelligent way than just by drawing lines in the sand between what you should and shouldn't do. It's like, well, that line has to bend when you're talking about it's this or it's suicide. Like, you know? I had a really, really shit drug worker once, Carl, who told me I just needed to delete my dealer's contacts, get all the drugs out of the house and just sit with the feelings. Now, had I ever taken his advice, I reckon I would absolutely be dead, because the last time I had no drugs, no medication and no way to get any, I ended up in hospital for an entire week, fucked up for 6 months due to an overdose of over-the-counter medication that was the best I could do as far as feeling any kind of sane, and it just ended up smashing my liver to bits. As the most simple and visual example I can give you regarding this death or drugs equation, once upon a time I bought some lovely purple rope with which to make a noose and, you know, do what you do with. Do you know what I ended up doing with it instead? It became a lovely soft new tourniquet for shooting up. I turned a way to die into a way to get high. It was still far from ideal, but I know which one I'd rather a loved one use if it came to the crunch. And at this point, I'd like to throw in another clip from Call Me a Tusa on the subject of ADHD and dopamine.
People with ADHD and their loved ones are suffering and they don't even know that it's because of this. The big problem is a dopamine deficiency. Dopamine is the chemical that gets released in your brain and makes you feel good. It basically is the very thing that makes you feel happy and motivates you to do things, because you know at the end of a task, this chemical is going to be released and you're going to feel good. But imagine if there was no internal reward for getting things done. Imagine that there was very few things that made you feel good. Imagine if there was no reward to your hard work. And imagine that at the same time, everything felt kind of frustrating. That is the main issue with ADHD in adults. That is why people think people with ADHD don't try hard enough, or they're lazy, or they don't care. It's not that. It's just that our brains don't give us the reward that your brains give you when you do things.
So basically, what dopamine deficient living looks like is the total inability to motivate oneself to go after the natural feel-good chemicals that neurotypicals get from pleasurable activities like walking in nature or socializing with friends, or from finishing productive tasks like cleaning the house. Because for us, when we do those things, that dopamine reward just doesn't come. We get totally cheated by our own neurochemistry. We drag ourselves out to socialize and just sit there fake smiling and wondering what the fucking point was. Like, I'll enjoy it when I get there. I'll enjoy it when I get there. I feel fine. You know, for some of us, if you go there and you're totally sober, that reward, that feeling of any kind of, it just doesn't come unless you supplement it artificially. or we clean the house and don't feel any kind of good about having done it. It'll only be a mess again in 5 minutes anyway. And now we just feel drained, frustrated and pissed off. No sense of achievement, no sense of reward. So why did we even bother? And after a lifetime of these neurochemical letdowns, maybe it's completely understandable that we find basic daily tasks almost impossible unless we supplement our dopamine deficiency with some kind of substance. If we're socializing, we take something or we drink something. If we need to do our jobs or household chores, we take something or we drink something. The most basic things in life can only be done if we are receiving the feel-good chemicals our brains ought to produce from some artificial source, which obviously is what happens with ADHD meds, that, you know, they're dopaminergic. They are giving you more dopamine so you have the motivation to get up and do all of these things. Is one of the mechanisms of ADHD meds, which I am not on because it's a whole fucking long story. But once you get to a certain age and they diagnose you too late and you've got this whole messy ass history of mental illness, they go, oh, you've got a messy ass history of mental illness. We don't want to make it worse. It's like, how can you make this worse? But nonetheless, they don't, no, I'm not prescribed at the moment. And if we can't have those things, those artificial sources of dopamine, life can become impossible to the point of chronic suicidality. I saw an interesting video on this too, relating to pathological demand avoidance, or PDA, in autistic people by Erinrackham. Here's what she had to say.
Some of us, we come to this earth just not really understanding the point of life because everything feels like work to us. From the time we're very young, life is just really overwhelming and really hard. At some point you wake up to the realization that you do have another choice. You could leave. And so you have to make the choice as to why you're staying when you have pathological demand avoidance, because the choice to stay alive is a demand. It's awful, and it's like you're just born cursed with this, I guess. And the only thing I'm coming up with is like coming up with reasons to live, like finding high, joyful, high dopamine, high reward activities, I guess. And I'm starting to recognize, the pattern of addiction in generational trauma and stuff, of like alcoholism and things. It's like maybe everyone's just chasing nervous system peace. And it's really hard for me with my brain because I just don't get reward from what most people do. My brain will never be satisfied. And that is just my life, I guess.
I wholly agreed with this one too. The fact that living in and of itself feels like some endless toilet scrubbing shithole of a job with really, really bad pay. And of course it is. If you have ADHD and or PDA, life is an underpaid job. Most people are paid in life by happy chemicals. Happy chemicals are life's reward. They're the reason you like doing things, or at the basic minimum, they're the reason you can motivate yourself to do them at all. Happy chemicals are ultimately the reason you enjoy being alive. So if your brain doesn't produce them at the right times or at all, you are in essence being underpaid for doing the very same work that everyone else is adequately paid for. And then people have the goddamn audacity to wonder why you don't want to be here. PDA autistics, I think we often struggle to get on the same page as the rest of the world when it comes to how we see life. And this is a little bit dark, but for example, I made a video recently about all those sodding channeled messages that are forever popping up on TikTok trying to tell me what's about to happen in my near future. Whenever they say I'm about to fulfill my sole purpose, realize all my dreams and be blissfully happy, I strongly suspect that I'm about to die. Because seriously, all those descriptors could not, for me, fit anything involved in living. Of course, there is the odd little thing I'd like to get done before I croak, and there are people on Earth who I would miss, but overall, dude, I don't want to be here. I've done my time as far as I'm concerned. If you've heard any of my story times, you will know how fully and entirely I deserve to go down with the 27 Club, and instead, here I still am 11 years later. The last average autistic life expectancy statistic I heard was 39. 39 average life expectancy. I'm 38. And it definitely feels like this hellish marathon has got to be coming to a close because I simply have no more spoons with which to do anything. The idea that I could, physically speaking, survive in this body for another 40 years is the most disturbing and terrifying crap I've ever heard. Like the idea of that, the idea that the entirety of time I've spent on this hellish planet there could be that all over again, plus a bit, for me to still live out before I escape from this planet. You are shitting me. That... How? What? I've been battling my treatment team for over 2 years now in trying to get a prescription that would be effective in treating me and in treating all of this. Other people in my country are prescribed the med I need, and in fact, in both of my neighbouring counties, kill me now, both of my neighbouring counties, I would have access to it. But my drug treatment place, nah, they can't be asked. And get this, if I moved to a different treatment place, if I moved to one of these ones in a neighbouring county where they do this med that I need, right, they still wouldn't give it to me because it would be drug-seeking behaviour. Even though they were literally advertising the treatment on their website until I phoned them up and asked for it and pointed out, yeah, it's on your website. Is it really drug-seeking to ask for something that you're advertising? Well, when I said that, they literally removed their entire online presence, which feels very much like a personal fuck you, fuck your life, fuck your survival, there's no room on this planet for you. And when it comes to my own treatment centre, CGL, at the point where every first-line treatment for addiction, therapy, Suboxone, methadone, NA meetings has failed, they are supposed to allow you access to second-line treatment, not leave you to die in a fucking ditch. But they do, and the fact is eventually I probably will. Whether it's a self-medicating dose screw-up that takes me out, or the simple fact that existing between shit prescription drugs and the threat of suicide is increasingly impossible, who knows, something's going to take me out. And it is so preventable, because like say, this drug, this treatment does exist in the neighbouring 2 counties. It should be accessible to me. According to the government's website on treatment protocol, it should be accessible to me. But CGL... they don't want to do it. They don't give a fuck. They're not bothered. Between my screwed up neurochemistry and the absolutely shite level of care from the people I should be able to rely on, suicide seems an inevitability. And this inevitability is, frankly, just adding another brick to the might as well get it over with pile. Because really, what is the point, I constantly feel, of struggling on for another week, another month, another year that I don't even enjoy, and that ultimately ends the same way anyhow? Much of the time, honestly, I wish I'd just damn well gone for it the very first time I thought seriously about... I've told you the story if you've read my book, Millennium Gothic. It's all in there. Sitting in that hot, dusty shed at 9 a.m. on a school day, circa 1998... my suicide note lying on the lawnmower and a blade hovering in uncertainty over my wrist. I don't know why I didn't go for it, to be honest. Obviously, there have been amazing people along the way who I never would have gotten to know, but did they make it worth it? To my mind, no. And you know my story. Maybe if you've been around these parts before, you'll know how much I loved Ash in particular, how much I treasure the 13 years I knew him. The highs have undoubtedly been high, but they have also been few and far between, while the lows have been vast and long and deep and all-consuming, like, 8 years at this point of just bullshit, like my entire 30s bullshit. 8 years, really 8 years of what is the point? 8 years, 8 straight years, what the fuck? My brain does not produce the happy chemicals that pay everyone else for their shitty tenure on this planet, so... the answer is no. To me, all I see looking back at my life is one tedious overtime shift that I wish I'd never showed up for at all. But on we roll. Life continues through no choice of my own. People tell me they can't believe I'm really very depressed because I seem so happy and colourful. To which I say 2 things. For one, I'm 38. Thus my autistic mask is so locked in place, even I cannot remove it. In the words of the Manic Street Preachers... do not listen to a word I say, just listen to what I can keep silent. And for 2, never assume you actually know a person or understand their life based on such a tiny, brief, selectively edited window into it. Because no one wants to seem like a bummer. No one wants to seem like a bummer. No one wants to talk about this stuff. I remember my friend who died in 2017, he was always saying on Facebook, I can't be honest on here. I can't be real on here about how much I'm struggling with anything. I can't, because every time I do, people unfriend me. I see my stats, my friendship stats just drop. Like, I don't even know how many friends I've got on Facebook. It's not something I watch. But he clearly did, and he would notice every time he posted it, you know, and he had a lot of shit on his plate. He was going through a lot of shit, but every time he talked about it, and it's like, well, you know, if that's your friends, I can understand not wanting to lose friends, but if it's like your livelihood that you're potentially losing every time you're honest about stuff, and not just that, but the moral implications too, the moral implications of bumming people out when they generally come to you to be cheered up or distracted, and you're just like, oh, here, have fucking unnecessary shit about my life that's miserable and that's going to bring you down instead of bringing you up. Like, why? What's the point? So you generally try and not bum people out, but you know, I feel at this point in this context of this video and these things that need saying, clearly the fact that this has become such a discourse on TikTok, I feel like clearly there are a lot of other people going through this. Therefore, it is something that is worth talking about. It's not just randomly, selfishly, pointlessly throwing out a whole dish of, oh, my life sucks, you know, because you see it all the time, don't you, when people do die on TikTok, and you get people doing the little montage of like, oh, this was 6 months before they died, this was, you know, a week before, a day before, and they're always like, looking super happy, and people are like, but they seem so happy. It's TikTok. It's a TikTok. They made a TikTok. They were in front of their phone making a TikTok that is like selectively edited. No one wants to seem like a bummer, particularly, you know, older millennials who don't take easy to crying on the internet. Like we don't. It's honestly, I think even young people these days don't like crying on the internet. It was like a periodic thing that people did for a while, crying on the internet. And I don't think most people want to do it. You know, we don't really all want to get proper like Blair Witch Project-y, like snot dripping out of my nose. My life sucks. We don't want to do it, man. And people do abandon you. And I know that because, you know, I mean, even my lockdown, like my private Facebook friends list and all that, like, yeah, I think everyone's put me on mute, honestly, at this point, because barely anyone interacts with anything I say, and the more depressed it is, the less people interact. So I think people just have me on mute because I've been talking about how miserable I am for fucking 8 years, and they've got nothing more to say to me, and they can't be arsed listening, and I don't really blame them. Anyway, we've gone way off topic here. So I guess my final point is drug and alcohol treatment needs to be studied and understood differently when it comes to neurodivergent people. We need an array of treatment options, not just full sobriety 12-step shit or dismal methadone scripts or fuck off, because that's all it is at the moment. Some of us have gravitated towards our drug of choice because it's the only damn thing that keeps us going. We need either a safe, monitored dosing schedule or a clean, safe, prescribed alternative. And you know what really boils my piss here? They know. The government fucking know it. They do. There have been studies on diamorphine scripts for heroin addicts, and they have never failed to be a raging success. But people just don't care, not about the mentally ill. The government doesn't care, and particularly my treatment agency, CGL, who will be fully fucking implicated in my premature death when it eventually occurs, do not care. And all I can hope is that my dad's still alive when I cark it, because he is one litigious individual, and I would love to fucking see CGL get the arse sued off them, even if I have to watch it from the afterlife. Change, grow, live. That's what they're called, my treatment agency. Change, grow, live. I've been there for 14 fucking years and nothing has changed. No one has lived. It's been more like rot, dying slowly in stagnant agony, constantly butting heads with your fuck-brained workers. But I guess that doesn't make for such a vibrant statement, does it? Change, grow, live. Fuck, I told you this would be a rant, and apparently even pre-scripting it won't rein me in. On which subject? Have you ever wondered why all of a sudden my videos are nearly all pre-scripted? Not just the story times, that was a project and I enjoy it, but these ones too. The subject-oriented shit that I used to just talk at you, used to just get on and be fairly eloquent and blah, 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 say my piece. Ever since winter 2020, they're either pre-scripted or they are edited horribly with endless pieces moved about, cut out or inserted because I totally forgot. Ever wonder why? Does anyone else notice this stuff? Well, that all leads back to CGL too. And I fucking hate it. The fact that I can't just sit down and make a video anymore without writing out the words, then reading it all off a cue card like a brainless primate. But that's what they've done to me, and we'll get to that on another day. Dare say I'll have to prescript that rant too, irony of fucking ironies, but I'll get the point across somehow in the end. They haven't completely lobotomized me yet, much as they seem to be trying. So in summary, drug treatment, like most of the bullshit on earth, doesn't cater to neurodivergence, and no one cares enough to try. However, as one final obligatory note of saccharine optimism, it won't be that way forever. It can't. Because in another roughly 2 generations, I would say, there will be more of us on this planet than there's ever been before neurodivergence. Because in the past, they threw us all in rancid sanatoriums to rot away, but these days we're out in the world, fucking and breeding and sharing our stories, and someday, I reckon, our violent sense of justice will get things done. A treatment agency that isn't just rot in hell, CGL, will rise up, and maybe our average life expectancy won't be 39 anymore. But that's about the only hope I can give you, and it's not even hope for your own generation. So on that shakily optimistic note, I'm going to do a shut up. Sorry, this was deeply negative. Thanks for listening if you made it this far. And if you're any of the mentioned TikTokers, who I will all reference below in case you want to find them, huge thank yous for being so raw and for putting those videos out there. They meant the world to a lot of people, myself included. Like say, I had to download the first one, throw it at my drug worker with a huge screed of a text. Achieved nothing, just like everything, everything you throw at them achieves nothing. But, it gave me hope for 5 minutes, and that was nice. So keep on keeping on, keep on speaking up. And something hopefully cheerier next time if you want to drop me a cheerier topic to get on with. So thanks for listening to me rant. And this was very ranty. Sorry about that. Over and out. Bye-bye.